I think that one of the most important skills in life is the ability to ask deep questions to people and the ability to ingratiate yourself with people in such a way that they're interested in answering your question, that they like you. You don't have to have some deep relationship where they're telling you their secrets, right? Like, I don't even think trust is the most important thing in a new relationship because, again, they're not telling you their deepest secrets.
Today, I'm going to be interviewing an unbelievably successful and interesting entrepreneur, community builder, intentional culture builder, and a guy who bought a ski mount. I mean, this guy has just done so much cool stuff. One of the most influential people in my life. And he's going to be talking about the power of questions and why you should live your life like you're a podcaster. I hope you enjoy. Hey guys, really excited to have Elliott Bisnow with me today. He's the co-founder of Summit Group, which is Summit Series, Summit Junto, Summit Impact, and Powder Mountain. You guys literally own a mountain, which I still think is one of the coolest things that any of my friends have ever done. Super successful startup investor, also co-founded Bisnow Media, and now the co-author of Make No Small Plans, which is just a super cool book of kind of your journey with your three friends to build just this incredible community. And really wanted to start and say partly why this is such a meaningful discussion today for me is that, Elliott, you're one of the most influential people in my life. I don't know if I ever got to tell you that, but I always say there was life before Summit and life after Summit. And I feel like I opened a portal to ultimately the people that became my best friends in life, people that became my business mentors and guides. And back in the day when I had no idea what I was doing running my family business, I called you and said, how do you do what you do? And you were like, come to San Diego and we'll talk about it. And I just really appreciated that you showed up for me in that way. And yeah, just thank you so much for being here.
Heck yeah, that means a lot. Thanks for saying that. And I'm excited to be chatting.
Yeah, man. And I think I really have a big question for you that because of the perspective that you'd have and the fact that you have cultivated these amazing communities of influential, super successful people, I really would love to start out with the idea of a big question of how do you balance this go big rocket ride with like it's enough and fulfillment? And I think that's a big question that I've struggled with in my life. And I think a lot of people in my circles have also kind of had that question of like, I want to go big, I want to change the world, but I don't want to be a martyr for it either.
I mean, that's the problem with starting a business is there's no way or it's very difficult to have kind of a chill business. Like when you jump in headfirst to achieving your dream, it kind of sucks you all the way in. And you really need to put up parameters from the very beginning about, around how you want to live your life, how much you want to work. Because if you don't, your team, your client, your customers or clients, like everyone's coming for your time, and your business and your dream that you're trying to fulfill can completely overwhelm you. So I always thought what was most important was how I want to work, not what I want to work on. I always thought it was much more important how I want to feel, how I want to spend my time. Let's just say you want to, have a new startup around managing aircrafts. That's perfect for you. And the first things to actually figure out are, well, how many hours a week do you want to work? What kinds of people do I want to work with on my team? Like, what do I want my teammates and employees to be like? Do we want to work in an office or do we want to be remote? Do we want to be working till, 9 p.m. at night? Do we want to be working on the weekends or do we want to have, time off for our families? What kind of clients do we want to have? Are we willing to take, big clients that'll make us lots of money, but they might not be great people? Or are we going to, have a line in the sand of what kind of people we're willing to work with? And so I think most folks don't create the how they want to work ahead of time, and then they just get sucked into it. And they end up, creating their dream and then resenting their dream, right? They're building this thing and then it just becomes so difficult, so challenging, which is actually okay to work hard, but they don't like the people they're working with. They are frustrated with their customers. So that's the thing for a long time I've actively thought about.
And was it always that way for you with even building Summit? Did you have a pretty clear path on that pretty early on?
Yes. After my first business, I with Summit from, since 2008. I really thought, Summit is going to be about, our, let's say, our clients, our customers, if you will. That's the Summit community. We don't think of them as customers. We think of them as community, but, those are the people that we're in service of, that buy tickets to events, and it really matters who comes, right? I want to be servicing people that I really care about. I want to be servicing nice people. And then, the best part for me always was actually the people that I got to work with, the employees. I always call them team members. But that was the best part for the last 15 years for me, was who I actually work with day to day and who shows up next to me, shoulder to shoulder, how they interact with me. And we created, to answer your question, a culture from the first day where, we wanted our team members to feel really great about challenging their bosses. We wanted them to bring ideas to the table. We wanted everyone to get along, really well at the company. So from the very beginning, we said, the reason we're doing this is so we can, service customers we really love and care about, and so that we can have a team we really care about. The goal of Summit was never to make money at the expense of, sacrificing other things. Well, we'll make more money, but we'll have team members we don't really like, and we'll have customers that, we don't really like, but we'll just like sell them tickets because we'll make more money. So we always had kind of our true north, if you will, of how we wanted to do business.
You said something at the beginning where you're saying, people have this dream that they're chasing and they often don't define the how. One, what was your dream, and was the how part of your dream definition?
Yeah, I think when somebody starts a business, it's basically always from the same feeling in their soul that arrives from an experience or a moment where something that they're going through in the world sucks, and they realize, like, that's crazy. Like, there's no school for my kid that I like, and the only options are this and this, and I've just, like, this has been so crappy for so many years, like, I'm done. I'm building my own school or whatever. Like, this is how like this is how people arrive at their startup moment. And I think when it's your first startup, from that moment, you just go to build the startup. But for your second startup, you've already done one. So you realize that, like, let's just say you and I want to run a marathon. Like, let's just say that's our dream, Nick. For our first time running a marathon, we're just like, let's go achieve that goal. And it's in 2 months from now, and we're going to run that marathon. We just train as hard as we can. And then we realized 2 months later, like, we forgot to eat healthy food, and we overtrained, and we wore the wrong shoes, right? And so for the second marathon, we're like, the how we train really matters. And, if you're going to be running 4 hours a day, we might as well be running with people we like, and let's run a marathon in a beautiful place and whatever. So it's kind of the same thing for a startup. After you do your first startup, you realize, like, it's great to have a dream. But if you go about trying to fulfill that dream and build that startup without doing it in in a way that's going to be fulfilling, you can end up building that school in a way that burns you out, and you work 100 hours a week, or with, teachers that you don't get along with, or, students that aren't the right fit, or on a campus that's not the right, campus. So I think the how is something that hopefully early in your career, just after your first startup, you realize, like, I really need to get this how right.
Yeah. And do you see it that is something that is commonly overlooked? Because I don't know a lot of people in my communities, like, part of obviously the Summit Network, YPO. I did EO for a while. I didn't hear a lot of people saying, like, these are my boundaries for what I'm willing to do to be successful at my business. It just felt like it was just this constant giving of self at the expense of, or at least for the, like you said, the dream of building the business, but very little fulfillment. I did not find that there was that much fulfillment in being a business leader or business owner.
I think that's accurate. And I think most people don't think about this, or as the business gets bigger, it can be harder, to implement this. But look, I can just speak to us. And for us, you know, the goal of life is life. The goal of life is to have a great life. The goal of business is not to have a monetization event where you make all this money 10 years later to do something else. Like that, those are the kind of things that always dumbfounded me. People who started a business with the goal is to make money. It's like, so you're going to spend 10 years doing something you don't really enjoy so you can make money to then have that money do something else. Like the goal of life is to enjoy life. The goal of business is that you're building a business you're enjoying the whole time. The goal of business is not just to make money at the expense of your personal health and your mental health. So for us, like the goal the entire time was there is no exit strategy. The goal is this is the exit. We are at the end game. This is what we want to do. Like if we got paid a lot of money, we would just want to do this. That's why we're doing it. And it
And
seems
was
kind of
this?
obvious, but I don't
I
think it
was
is
going
for
to
most
say
people.
it's not. I mean, I think that the dream of the startup or the entrepreneur is always like that big lotto ticket win where they're like, I exited for, $1 billion. And interestingly enough, I'm sure you've met a lot more people that have done that than I have. But on the other side, I've heard a lot of people say this also isn't great. Like I wasn't happy building the business, then I sold it, and then I wasn't happy not being a part of the business. So it sounds like you've kind of short circuited it a little bit and said, yeah, no, the business is in service of my life. And why would I defer my opportunity to live my life the way I want to because of my business? That does seem a little bit backwards. But who taught you that? I mean, how did you figure that out? Because again, in your 20s, you already seem to have a way better sense of how to make business work in your life than most people who are way late in the game.
Yeah, well, let me first say that I think for most people, if you had an unlimited amount of money, like it's pretty obvious that just retiring and playing golf all day with some other wealthy friends is not something most people want to do. Like it might be fun for a year, I guess. So, regardless of how much money any person had, like the thing that brings meaning to our lives is surrounding ourselves with people that we love and care about and can have fun with and adventure with, family, friends, and then being able to work on something that's meaningful. So, I feel that there is this, you know, this fallacy of the exit, and then all this good stuff happens after you make, money one day to then do something else. So the goal is you can just do it right now. And I think that's something I arrived at early that I realized in my early 20s. Like, I'm just going to do right now. I mean, I think The 4 Hour Work Week is the best book that I ever read that points that out. It's not about working 4 hours a week. That's just a catchy title. The book is about identifying like how you want to live and, how you want to work and not overworking yourself to death. And so that's what, we identified really early on. And again, I think, most people, they want to work on something meaningful. So you figure out the how you want to work, you figure out what you want to work on, you live in a way that, is below your means. And from the very beginning, you set your parameters and you start to, if you do that, people will self-select into being your coworker. They will want to work at, a firm with those types of values. They'll self-select into wanting to be, your client. And, our goal, again, if your goal is not to, make the most amount of money, then you're not focused on building the biggest business. Like with Summit, our goal was to service this amazing community and have a great team. So our goal wasn't to just put on as many events as possible and make them as big as possible. Our goal was to, do something really thoughtful, really well.
Yeah, you guys have done a really good job of that. That's for sure. It's been cool to see as well that see the community change shape from, I think 2010 was my first event in DC. And now going to, I was just in Palm Desert and seeing that, there's a lot more family aspect. And just so cool to see how the group has evolved. And again, I'm curious from your perspective, of all the things you're doing, because you still have, a lot of different meaningful things you're pushing for, which one is the closest to your heart? Which one is the one that gives you the most sense of meaning?
I mean, I've always enjoyed at my core having deep conversations with interesting people. That's really been probably my favorite thing to do. Um, Interesting people from every imaginable walk of life and asking them, deep, profound questions that are going to elicit, responses that are going to teach me things I don't know. That's just kind of my favorite thing, whether I'm walking in the park at dinner, like I'm kind of always engaging with people and going down rabbit holes with them. And I think that that's kind of what Summit is at its core, right? It's like getting really interesting people back from really interesting people together from really diverse backgrounds and, connecting everyone and then creating, these stages where you can also hear conversations with people who you wouldn't see in the ordinary course of your life. And so I think, yeah, at the core of it, I think, what I started, we started 15 years ago with Summit 14 years ago is still something that I'm really passionate about. And then, just to take it one step further, there's, when you go deep down rabbit holes with people and learn, you find that some of these new learnings are really interesting. Like, wow, I can't believe I never thought about that. I'm going down a rabbit hole with a, permaculturist or, someone who, is does off-grid living, or someone who's thinking about, relationships in a unique way, or, someone who's looking at, ancient civilizations and, questioning their origins. And so as you go down these rabbit holes with all these interesting, unique people and characters, you start to become more educated and then you start to have new interests. So I've found that by attending the Summit events myself and just being part of the community, I have this kind of never ending stream of new friendships and connections and of new interests that I'm always exploring.
When you're in kind of daily life, just interacting with random people, what kind of questions will you ask that will potentially kind of stoke the fire of these deep, profound conversations?
Well, that's a great question about asking great questions. Um, I think that one of the most important skills in life is the ability to ask deep questions to people and the ability to ingratiate yourself with people in such a way that they're interested in answering your question. They don't, that they like you. You don't have to have some deep relationship where they're telling you their secrets, right? I don't even think trust is the most important thing in a new relationship, right? It's about, because again, they're not telling you their deepest secrets, but let's just say I met you, Nick, and you have this interesting background in aviation. And so rather than doing the typical reporting set of questions, which is like, oh, so where are you from? And man, it's been what's the weather been like? I heard it's really snowy these last few days. And how many employees you got at the business? And what kind of aircrafts you got these days? Like those are kind of like reporting, like very boring questions that won't really take the relationship anywhere. And there's nothing to learn, right? And then
Right.
like the next level would be like, oh, I see some guitars behind you. You must like really, really like guitar. Like you play a lot, or what's that piece of art on the wall? Like, so that's like a little bit deeper, but like where you can really learn is, and you'll see this from the best interviewers. So they'll ask a really deep question and then they'll really deeply and passionately listen to the answer. And then their follow-up question will build on the response from the first question. So a good question would be, Nick, you mentioned that, you took over a family business. And I've always heard that it can be really like beautiful, but also challenging working with family. And I was wondering, what the hardest part was of taking over a family business was for you, like if there are any like rifts in your family that happened, but also what the most beautiful parts were. So that would be like a question that is not, wouldn't be like a secret answer. You need to trust me, but it'd be like a question that probably not a lot of people ask you, and then
Right.
allows you to like go deep into answering something. And from there, now we're off into like a deep conversation where if you ask good questions, people are also learning about themselves as they answer the questions.
Yeah, I mean, that's great to hear. I feel like one, it's good podcast school for me too, where you're like, ask deeper questions. Let's figure out how to do that better. And what I like about your question about the family stuff, so I have heard some people say over the years, it must be really hard to run a family business. And that's it. That's the end of the comment, right? They're kind of like saying like, I get what it's like to be you. No one's ever asked me the upside, not once. And no one's actually given me the space to say, can you tell me about what your experience of running a family business was like? What was the hard part and what was the positive part? That's really interesting. It seems like in many ways you're giving the person space to maneuver instead of the one that I typically get is someone trying to sound smart to me. Like, I know what family business is all about. It's hard, right? I'm like, okay.
One thing I do for the kids that I'll mentor or the younger entrepreneurs that'll reach out, it is just, and I'll give them challenges. It could be, reading books and whatnot, but like really the most effective challenge I've ever given people, and I've done over the years to lots of people that's worked for people from every imaginable background, regardless of how successful they are, what age they are, is I will challenge them that for 1 week, 90% of what comes out of their mouth has to be questions. And that the question, and that the questions, and that's all I'll say. And what'll happen, I won't even tell them the questions should be deep, but when they go into this mindset where they're only asking questions, and I'll tell them that if people ask them questions, to ignore the person's question and just keep asking questions until finally they kind of, have to talk. But what'll happen is they're now so in a mindset of asking questions and learning, they just naturally start asking deeper questions. But exactly like you said, people will go about hearing you have a family business and then they'll just talk at you. It's insane rather than ask questions. So, we're all our own, mini podcast hosts in the real world, right? You can literally go up to anyone and have as deep a conversation as you want to have. Like people generally, the joke about, New Yorkers love when you ask them directions and they'll just talk forever, right? But the truth is we all love being asked deep questions. And even for me, so few people actually ask me good questions. Like most people, and especially the more successful they are, the more they just talk at you. So successful people can actually be really uninteresting to have a conversation with because they're not interested in you. And then
Yeah.
when finally people ask you questions, the questions aren't that great. So to actually find someone who really wants to ask deep questions and, listen compassionately. And that's why, by the way, someone like a Lex Fridman is such a good podcast host, or a Joe Rogan, because they're actually just so good at asking questions and listening. Like they're really, really listening and going deep with people.
You said most people don't ask you great questions. Can you remember a question that completely leveled you or affected you, or it was like, wow, I did not see that coming and it moved you?
I would say that Alex Benayan, who wrote The Third Door, is one of the best people I've met at asking questions, and he just has a way where, you know, just even as friends, he kind of cuts through all the noise, and rather than ask me like, Elliot, so how are you and your wife doing? How was your week, or how was your guys' weekend? Like he'll just ask something like, was there anything special you guys did over the last week, and how did it make each of you feel? Right? He'll just frame it in a way rather than, and suddenly I'm like, yeah, well, we did this, and then he'll really ask me like, so how did that feel? Or if we were to read the same or say experience the same, news event rather than talk about the news event. He might ask like, well, how did you feel about that? Or how did it make you want to, what changes did you then want to make after hearing about this or seeing that?
Yeah, I saw him interview, God, who was he interviewing at the event?
The
And
founder of
multiple
Masterclass.
That's right, and everyone came back and was like, "Wow, Alex is incredible." He's again, wise beyond his years. You guys have that in common. Really, really interesting dude. And yeah, I've never thought so much about this idea of the power of questions. When I thought I'd be chatting with you, I thought it'd be a lot more around fulfillment, but it does seem like this is such a unique angle of things that I haven't thought that much about. And I know, like, for me, I had a lot of social anxiety growing up. So when I first went to Summit, I loved it. I found my tribe, but I still to this day, when I come into an event where I don't know a lot of people, it's really hard to navigate the room sometimes. I'm like, how do I feel like I belong here? And that studying of the idea of how to ask questions to people you don't know seems like such an important skill. Is there is there a book on it? Is there someone that you would recommend people look towards to kind of hone that skill of question asking? Or is it just listening to Alex Friedman?
Well, first, I would just recommend everyone do this challenge where they try to ask 90% questions for 1 week. And I think, like talking to you now, you're great at asking questions. And, that's the nature of a podcast is it's set up for questions. I think there's a real art in each of us becoming our own podcast host in real world, right? And there's an art to it because, the person you're talking to didn't ask to be interviewed, so you don't want to be pushy, right? But I think, it is asking questions is by far the best way to make new friends. I mean, I went to someone like a friend of a friend's house yesterday and I didn't know anyone there. And I just didn't know anyone. So what am I going to just go up and like talk at people? So I just have to go and say, hey, like, wow, what, I might say open with one kind of fluffy question, like, wow, like what, it's like, what are you spending your time like working on? Like, what are you most excited about? And then like whatever they answer, like from there, I can immediately go start down a rabbit hole. So like I'll often start, I'm not going to like open someone and be like, what was the best lesson you ever learned from your father? But I
Yeah.
might ask something kind of fluffy and they're like, yeah, I manage a hotel. And then I might from there just say, so like from that first point, as soon as I know, then I might go really down a rabbit hole. And again, it's kind of my genuine curiosity, but I might say, so what are some of the best experiences you've ever had with guests that were unexpected? Like, have you ever become like really good friends with a hotel guest? And so I find from like the second question, I can just start going down a rabbit hole. And that's kind of how I've built relationships. And I think it's like my natural curiosity, right? Like my questions are very authentic. It's not contrived. It reminds me of like on my own Larry King, right? People always loved him because he's so genuine. He just, he would talk. He would never prepare for an interview. He was just so genuinely curious about people.
That's pretty
So
awesome. Have you
people should do
I
this 90% challenge and they'll
so
realize that they never ask questions.
the fear that comes up for me, and it's interesting too, when you were saying that a lot of people don't ask questions when they're successful. I know for me, there were times where I had imposter syndrome. So the idea is like I felt like I wasn't allowed to ask big questions of successful people in a room. Is there times where you've found that people can have a really negative reaction? Like, who the hell are you to ask me that question right now? What do you do? Like, what do you know? Who do you know?
I've never had that experience ever. Not one time, not in 20 years of asking questions, has someone not wanted to answer questions. And especially at the even more successful levels, there's so much to asking questions. Like I get to learn, they feel respected, they feel interesting, they feel like, they can talk to a different generation, whatever it is. I've never had a bad experience asking questions. And again, there's an art to asking questions like there is to playing music. You can't just, going up to a celebrity and asking them, hey, can I have a photo is a bad question.
Right.
I know there's that quote about there's no bad questions. I mean, I think there are. It's an untimely question. Um, I think, yeah, I actually got, I had a kid I mentored who went up to a well-known person, like a celebrity. They told some of us, like, I met this well-known person and here's the photo I got with him. And I'm like, man, you had an opportunity. Like, we all know that celebrity is really into farming. Like, they just got their own farm and it's a well-known person. I said, that was your chance to like learn, like, why did you leave Hollywood and go create your own farm? Like, that's what nobody asked them. And instead, your question was, can I have a photo? So I think that people will have way more success than they think asking questions. Their existing relationships will deepen. They'll become more educated. You can learn so much. I mean, I think I just realized, Nick, there's not much for me to learn from talking. And there's so much for me to learn by asking people questions.
Amazing. Well, my last question to you today is, what is your dream? I mean, the concept of the show is that, a lot of people have an early idea of what their dream is. When they achieve that success, they realize, wait, I need a new dream. So from the outside, you seem like quite the successful guy. You've done a lot of really meaningful things in the world, but what do you wake up in the morning dreaming about now?
I The thing I've most enjoyed um, over the last 15 years is mentoring either the team members that I work with at our companies, or just people who reach out to me, who've then become my friends. Like, I really love helping folks. There's a knowledge exchange. I know I was just sharing how much I learned from asking questions, but when you're helping folks, especially younger people, there's so much that they have to learn uh, from an older generation, but there's so much the older generation we have to learn from them that we're totally out of the loop on. And so there's just this knowledge exchange that I just like devour. I really, really love it.
That's very cool. Well, I hope you continue to support people. Again, seeing the impact you've had on my life, I'm sure you're helping thousands and thousands of other people, maybe even more with the book. So just I appreciate you. And I think the biggest takeaway for me today is I think I want to title the podcast, Start Your Own Podcast with at least an audience of one, right? Like there's something to that idea of just live like you're in a podcast and see what you can go learn in the world. And in
It's
the
a fun
meantime,
challenge. I mean,
it's a great challenge. It's such a cool, I've never heard that before. And I think that's such a cool thing to recommend to people.
yeah, it's mind blowing how deep you can go with new folks immediately off the bat, how much deeper your interactions will be, how much more interesting other people will think you are. Like, just think about when you've had a conversation and someone just talks at you the whole time, you don't leave and say, wow, that person said so much brilliant stuff. Whereas when someone goes deep and engages you and asks you all these questions, you think, wow, that was a great conversation. So it's just, I think if everyone goes and does this challenge, they'll really enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, I really look forward to trying it myself. And in the meantime, if you were moved by what Elliott shared, definitely check out his book, Make No Small Plans. And more importantly, go check out summit.co. They have incredible events. I was part of Summit Gento last year and just really great way to meet incredible people in kind of like an advisory environment. It was just a really meaningful community. So go check all that out. And again, Elliott, thank you so much for making time to speak to us today.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks, Nick.
Awesome. Take care.